One of the things when I became executive director of the Alliance was the former executive director said, never give up any opportunity to do a quick commercial for yourself. And so I wanted just to have one slide about who we are in case you don't know. The Colorado Alliance of Research Libraries was actually founded here at DU back in the late 70s, and we were incorporated in 1981. And in the group, those early groups of libraries were the major academics in the state, as well as Denver Public Library. Since then, we've continued to grow, and we currently have 15 member libraries, 14 academic, 1 public, which is DPL, 1 out-of-state library, University of Wyoming. And one of the things that, we found over the years is people say, well, are you a state agency? No, we're not. We're actually a 501c3 nonprofit consortium, incorporated in 81. And when people question that, I say, well, look, we've got a city library, we've got state institutions, private institutions, 1 out-of-state member. So we're really quite a diverse group in some senses. But we do represent the research libraries in the region. And for years, we've done a variety of different projects. Probably one of the biggest things that we do is shared contracting for e-resources. And we probably have between $14 and $15 million worth of stuff that's now licensed through the office. Also, many of you are familiar with Prospector, our union catalog for discovery and delivery of materials. A Gold Rush system, which we'll be talking about later today, it historically was built for ERMS as a link resolver, but it's been sort of, in recent times, being more modified, and it's a framework for our content analytics. And so we'll be doing a whole session on that after me, going into some of the details. And we certainly, things like we're trying to be on top of what's going on in the industry. So shared print is, as Michael talked about, is probably one of the most important future initiatives we can work on as we collectively tailor our collections. So Michael talked about the need at the national level, but why should we do it here? If they're doing it, if they're saving everything elsewhere, is there a point at the local level? And first of all, as Michael pointed out, not everything is digital. And even if it were digital, we may not be able to afford reacquiring something in the digital format. So that's justification number 1. Secondly, some users still prefer print. Sometimes it's just a personal preference. Sometimes there's some value in the artifact itself. And there's some subject areas, and I like to think of art. My daughter was an art major at CU Boulder, and the print monograph, in her case, was really, really important. And so she used that collection quite heavily. So another piece of the component, as Michael mentioned, we have here is Prospector. The Prospector Union Catalog is an important puzzle piece, because if we're going to start tailoring, deduplicating, reading materials, and depending on others, well, your users then have to have a way to find and request the stuff at other libraries quickly and efficiently. Prospector's been around since 1999 and still plays that role and will continue to play that role. Certainly, the preservation of the intellectual record that Michael was talking about is a big national discussion, but we also can have a local discussion and a local emphasis on that, because things may be being done at the national or in other regions of the country may not always fit and meet our particular needs. So that local emphasis will be important for us. Keeping materials in our region for our users, putting users first is a big part of what we're doing. And we certainly also, by setting up our own print trust, we control our own policies and our destinies. Other groups come and go. Other groups maybe set up policies that we might like or dislike. But if we have our own trust, we can control what we're doing and why we're doing it. Now, a little bit of history of when did we start thinking about this? Well, we've been talking about it for years. As Michael mentioned, the Print Archive Network has been meeting for quite a while. Some of us have been attending. And so we've been talking about it informally in the collection development group. But probably, I would say, around 2014 is when the Shared Collection Development Committee, in collaboration with Member Council, which is our library deans and directors, said we should probably establish an initiative here. And that's when we began working on the policy documents in earnest. In 2015, we got sort of our base group of policy documents out, and some libraries have signed it. And you have copies of all of these policy documents in your packet. And I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail as we go on. And we've also, during the same time we were working on the policy documents, we began working on an analytics tool to help you do batch or large-scale comparisons of your collections and to tailor those comparisons. And we'll get a big in-depth look. As Michael pointed out, SCS, which Sustainable Collection Services, originally developed their own tool, and it's now called Green Glass. It's part of OCLC, but it's also quite expensive. And one of the challenges with that particular tool is it can't be updated. You put your data in once, you can great analysis, but then as you start to weed, duplicate, unduplicate, starting moving your collection around, you want to be able to do what effect has this had on us. So our tool can be updated on a regular basis. So when we started to build this tool, started to build our shared print trust, we wanted to work and build on the shoulders of others. And what we found is that by doing that, we were really able to expedite the process, because some of these early initiatives that started with shared print spent years and years working out the policies and procedures. And so by standing on their shoulders and by begging, borrowing, and stealing, as we all do, we're able to actually really get our policy documents in good shape quite quickly. We certainly followed what was going on at the Print Archive Network. People like Sam Demas, formerly from Carleton, was a consultant that worked with other consortia, not with us, but with other groups. The work from Sustainable Collection Services, now part of OCLC, Rick Lugg and Ruth Fisher, published some very good material in this area. And we really got copies of the policy documents from West, from Connect New York, Willa, and others. And those policy documents became the basis for the work that we were doing. So we did learn some lessons from others too. Another reason not to be the first kid in the block to do it. One of the things that we learned from several of the consortia was that it's really helpful to develop your policy agreements before you actually try to do a project or an initiative. Several of them were trying to do them simultaneously and got themselves all tied up in political knots. And so they said, get your policies, get your framework in place, and then you can move forward with a more reasoned approach into doing programs if you choose to do any. Also, we found that, of course, everyone suggests that during this last few years, various national standards have developed and emerged, and we're going to play off of those and participate in those national standards, because we don't want to build and do things locally, and then it's harder for us to fit into the national picture. So just like you do in your cataloging, you follow national standards, we better do that in our shared print program too. We also learned that you want to disclose your retention decisions locally, and we encourage it nationally, because once again, we want to plug into the national picture. And certainly we want to participate in the national discussion. But as I mentioned earlier, we want to keep our users at the forefront. And we also don't want to get bogged down sometimes in some kinds of details are important, but other ones can just hang you up. And so many initiatives have said, find ways to expedite what you're doing. Who signed the agreement so far? You can see the list up here. If you don't see your institution, encourage your library dean or director to sign it. The question is who should sign the document? It's who you designate. In most cases, it's been library deans and directors, but in other cases, maybe we've had a provost or somebody higher up in your institution sign it. That's your own local politics, but we encourage you to sign the agreement. So if you don't see yourself listed here, go ahead and talk to your library director. Now, just some general principles about what we've done. I stole this slide from Michael Levine Clark. So if it looks familiar, Michael, this is your slide. But I really liked it because what it did is it sort of characterized some key elements of what we're doing here locally. First of all, it's a distributed program, meaning that we're not a program where we're forcing everyone to put something into a common shared facility. Now, we do have Pascal, but that's only, at the moment, I believe, shared by, with 4 institutions, the CU system. So that when commitments are made, whether the item is in Pascal, whether it's in your stacks, or whether it's in your own local storage facility, many of you have off-campus storage sites, is a distributed model. Secondly, it's voluntary. Nobody is forced to participate in the program, and even if you do sign on to it, it's still voluntary. So we've got sort of a print trust light. In other words, where it's not very, it's not heavy-handed like the main model that Michael was talking about. And it's flexible. We've tried to build a framework that we can expand and tailor as we go along. And it also allows other libraries to come in if there's other libraries in the region that may not even be a member of the Alliance, but maybe it makes sense to have them work with us. And certainly, as Michael mentioned, it's a non-exclusive program, meaning you can participate in our Alliance Shared Print Trust, but maybe you've got other groups you're working with. Is it the Oberlin Group? Is it West? What other groups? Is it Gwilla? What other groups are you working with? And they may have some flavor of their own shared print trust. And so participating with us doesn't preclude working with other groups and vice versa. Right now, the program really has 4 major documents that are in your packet. And probably the key document is the Memorandum of Understanding, or the MOU. That's the framework on which all of the others hang. And there's a signature on that document that sort of officially signifies your participation. There's also a last copy policy for circulating monographs, a disclosure policy, how do we let people know what we're doing, and a serials policy. So first of all, I'm just going to give a few characteristics of each of these. You can read these policies in great detail when you've got time. First of all, this is what's signed by each participating member. Secondly, it establishes the program on behalf of the group and provides this framework from which everything else will hang. It provides guidelines for withdrawal, but it also makes it clear that the costs for participating are your costs. If you're going to store material, that's your cost to store it. If you're going to make updates to your MARC records, that's your cost to do it. There's no central funding coming to handle this. So it's a coalition of the willing that where we each bear our own costs as we move forward. And most importantly, it's a 25-year commitment that will be reviewed on a 5-year basis. Why 25 years? I think it was a number being used by many of these shared print programs around the country. It just seemed like a reasonable number. But we do want to have a periodic review because times change. What if, most of it becomes available digitally in a trusted form? Then it might change the conversation. And we might want to think about how we redo things down the road. But a 25-year commitment when you tag something for long-term ownership, but review it on a periodic basis. A quick look at the circulating policy for, the last copy policy for circulating monographs. It really focuses on the circulating materials, not your special collections. And it defines procedures for getting rid of your last copy. In other words, what if you're getting rid of stuff out of your collection? It's got recommendations for if you're defining it, but what if you're going to get rid of it? So one of the big issues is if you want to get rid of a last copy, the idea is to offer it to somebody else in the group. And there was a big discussion at member council about whether this entailed giving property, or if you're a state institution, state property to somebody else. And the answer is no. Why? Because this is stuff you were planning on getting rid of. So instead of taking it and bringing it to the dumpster, it means that you're offering it, that lost copy, nobody else owns it, you're offering it to somebody else in the region who we hope will agree to take it. And we've got listed in the policy institutions who are willing to be last copy recipients to take materials that maybe others want to get rid of. And of course, there's always recommendation. There's always a back door. You know, sometimes you're going to get rid of stuff because it's, materials that just doesn't make sense to keep. Manuals and other sorts of things, old medical textbooks, things that just don't make sense to keep for the long term. So there's the policy talks about some of the details on that. Disclosure policy really talks about how you record what you're going to retain. And there's sort of two requirements, minimal requirements in the program, and then there's two optional requirements. How do you say you're going to keep something? It means in your MARC record, there's a certain MARC field, the 583, which Paul and Laura will be talking about this afternoon, where you indicate that you're going to be keeping something for the long term. When you put that in your MARC record in your local system, we now have Prospector configured, that information will bubble up to us. And so that a library doesn't have to go from library catalog to library catalog. If you put it in your local MARC record and that record's contributed to Prospector, that updated decision will flow to Prospector. And so that you'll have a single place to check if you want to look at an individual item. And the disclosure policy talks about details of the 583. The serials policy, we really modeled sort of after GWILA, the Greater Western Library Alliance. It includes many of the larger libraries west of the Mississippi, one or two east of the Mississippi, and it really talks about storage obligations. Once again, it's a distributed model, how to handle repairs and restorations, maintenance of things in the original form, damage or loss notices. Talks about ownership and maintenance of retained materials. If, for example, you want to get rid of a journal run, and it's the last copy in the region, you want to transfer it to someone else, just like with monographs, you are basically discarding it from your collection, giving it to somebody else, and then it becomes theirs. But on the bigger picture, it means that that monograph or this serial is still available in the region in print. It does talk about access and use for serials, and it's something I don't think will ever happen, but it says that if you store something and a library had multiple requests for it, you would give preference to somebody in the Lion Shared Print Trust. Once again, no specific serial policies have been defined at this point in time, but that's a point for discussion perhaps later today or in the future. And I just have a quick screenshot of a record showing something where a 583 field has been added to a MARC record and how it's reflecting in the Prospector system. Now, determining collection overlap. There's sort of two ways you can do that. How do you know if something is the last copy? If you're working in single items or in small numbers of items, you can just look it in Prospector, and you'll see who else owns it. It includes everybody in the Alliance, and it also includes other libraries in the region. And we will show if there's retention decisions, commitments that have been made, as I just showed, that will show up in Prospector. But we realize that many of you aren't working with single items or small groups. You're working in large batches. You want to do much larger analysis. So after my presentation, we're going to have Rose Nelson talking about the content comparison system, the analytics tool we've developed, and it's going to be a great way for you to compare what you've got, and you can tailor these comparisons by virtually anything in the MARC record. You can use subject headings, dates, formats, call number ranges, a variety of different other fields that can be searched or limited to with searches or facets. So you'll get a more in-depth look on that in a few minutes. But we've developed that tool because libraries, I think, will find it very useful. Also, we wanted to be able to allow other libraries to be able to use it. So we actually have, in addition to our own Colorado Alliance group, We have now a group of about 12 libraries in ASERL that Michael mentioned, Association of Southeast Research Libraries, University of Florida, Florida State, Auburn, Clemson, Duke, Emory. They're all in the system now. I've got a conference call tomorrow with East. They've done a project. They actually are using the shared collection service from OCLC. They paid a lot of money for it, but they found they couldn't update it. So they go, okay, we had this great tool that we paid OCLC a lot of money for, but now we can't really do anything now with it. So we're considering looking at a pilot for them. What can we do to help support their program? So, and the advantage of bringing in some other libraries is that because we're already doing this for us, it allows us to get a little bit of extra revenue to help offset costs and membership fees and so forth. So just a couple of practical thoughts in conclusion. First of all, as Michael mentioned, some libraries are just declaring long-term commitment to records and to materials, and that's great because that declaration is fast and it allows others to play off of those declarations. If you've got portions of your collection that you know you're going to keep no matter what anyway, just declare them. But there are other triggers. One of the things is building renovation and programs. So a lot of times that's a big driver in this sort of situation. And we know a lot of libraries have already done that. One of the things that got our interest as this has happened over the last 5 years is that some libraries were getting rid of stuff just because they had to. We didn't have the framework in place. We didn't have the tools in place. Well, now we've got the framework and the tools in place. So if you are doing future renovation, future building projects, we encourage you to use the tool that Rose will be showing in a few minutes, because that can help you make smarter decisions about what to get rid of so that you can make extra space or store less. Another big issue is getting the political monkey off your back. Because as you start to weed your collections, as you start to put stuff in storage, oftentimes, I've heard the stories from Michael, and some of you maybe have experienced this too, where you're getting rid of stuff and somebody finds it in a dumpster and it becomes a big brouhaha on your campus or at your institution. Well, this is a way then to say to that local newspaper, that local administrator, we are actually working in consort with other libraries in the region to get rid of unneeded duplicates, and our people, our constituents won't lose access because there will still be most of the material available through Prospector for quick discovery and delivery. So that political portion can't be minimized. That's really important. As this afternoon, we'll start thinking about specific initiatives. We've got the framework, we've got the tools. Do we want to do something beyond just the declarations of we want to keep things? So I think, once again, open for a question or two, and then we're going to turn it over to Rose, who's going to actually spend some time looking at the tool. We're going to try online demonstrations of it. If for some reason the internet or the demonstration gods don't work, we do have screenshots of everything so that we can jump back to PowerPoints. But it's actually more interesting to actually see the tool in operation, because it's actually an amazing piece of work that's been done by our developers, Chet Redman, who's sitting in the back here. And that tool is something that's really pretty unique. As I said, the only other one that's really on the market is what's available through OCLC, through Green Glass, but quite expensive. So open it up for any quick questions before we jump into actually looking at the tool. If not, I think the tool will bring up a lot of questions. And matter of fact, one of the things we hope to get out of doing the show and tell today with the analytics tool is to get your advice on what else you would like to see. We've set up certain indexes, certain limiting facets, certain features in the system. And have we thought of everything? Absolutely not. And so we hope today, and also as you start to use it down the road, tell us, hey, I want a facet to narrow this way. Hey, I want a certain kind of search set into the system to be able to do things. Because really, with your feedback, we can make this analytics tool better, and we're in control of it. So if there's features you want, we can add those in. So, yes, yeah.
So George, you talked about this being voluntary and flexible, and
Right.
however any library wants to participate. So we would, and this may be more true after Rose does her demonstration, but are we assuming that the way we know what other people are doing is just through the tool, or are there other avenues of knowing what each other is doing?
Right. Good question. I think the tool is one way to know what we're doing, but I think that part of maybe what we need to start to do is if we start coming up with some specific projects or initiatives based around the broad framework, then I think we obviously need to communicate that so that we know at a general level. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have a list of everyone who's here, so we can start to maybe build a mailing list or something else where we can talk to each other. And make offers and do things. So, yeah, I think that as we go forward, that's what we'll figure out. So, but the tool will certainly be one important piece of it.